From the Southeast Asian capital city of the Philippines, Manila, good morning, good afternoon, if you're over here where I am. Good evening in other parts of the world. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. And I'm Art Bell, filling in for George Norrie, who has the spooky evening off, well-deserved night off. All is well. Maybe. All the ABs are well anyway. And it is November 1st here in the Philippines in the afternoon. It's All Saints Day here, which actually is a holiday in the Philippines. And most Filipinos will gather food and take it to their dead relatives, visit their graves. In fact, I picked up something I thought you'd be interested in from Yahoo Philippines this morning. I read the local news every morning. And I'll just read it as it is and see what you think. The demons talk to you. The Reverend Father Michael Joe Zerudo, a parish priest in the Divine Mercy Church and a real-life exorcist, describes what demons do during an actual exorcism. He is an exorcist here in the Philippines. He says that a demon can make a possessed person talk in a foreign language, do bodily contortions, even levitate. The demon is a show-off, he says. The reason why Satan or the demon makes a person do bodily contortions is that he wants to intimidate. When fear sets in, the demon, he says, already has you. Exorcism, indeed, is a very intriguing ritual for us Filipinos, but for the Roman Catholic Church, this has been done since the time of Christ. According to Father Zerudo, maybe somebody I should get as a guest. Exorcism is a sacramental or an official prayer of the Church that is designed to drive away demons from persons, objects, or places possessed or infested by them. In other words, it is a direct confrontation with the devil, ordering him to go back to hell. Exorcism dates back to the time when Jesus Christ himself drives away demons. He gave his disciples basically two powers, one to heal the sick, number two to drive away demons. So here you have the beginnings, says Father Zerudo, of exorcisms. In fact, way back in 1614, the Roman Catholic Church compiled prayers of exorcisms and even made changes, and I didn't know this, in 1999. Father Zerudo adds that not anyone can perform the ritual in the church. The bishop does exorcisms because he possesses the fullness of the priesthood and the holy orders, but a bishop can also designate this power to priests, and that is how Father Zerudo became an exorcist. Filipinos often mistake possession with exorcism. Possession refers to cases wherein demons go into the body of a person, while exorcism is the ritual. Also, contrary to popular belief, exorcists do not necessarily see dead people. The ritual is very delicate, can even be dangerous. This is the reason why exorcists first ask the person to undergo a psychiatric evaluation before the exorcism. The exorcist will interview the person and try and find out how the devil made the claim of that person's body. They then ask the person to confess and fix his or her relationship with the Lord. On the day of the actual ritual, both the exorcist and the possessed person are asked to fast. The exorcist also celebrates Mass. At the start of exorcism, Father Zerudo says, the exorcist prays the Litany of Sins, reads out a gospel passage and a psalm. Then the priest asks the demon's name, when it entered the body, when it will leave. He adds, when the demon answers back, the demon is hurting the most. Sometimes he refuses to give his name and just leaves without giving his name. In rare instances, the demon becomes stubborn and won't get out. The person concerned must have given him a reason to stay, especially when they've tasted favors from the demon according to Father Zerudo. A doctor is present during exorcism to look after the possessed person, while a lawyer is also there to observe the ritual and avoid any legal liabilities. He also says that he is not scared to do exorcism anymore. Faith requires that there is considerable amount of confidence with the Lord. The power to exercise is with the Lord. The Lord is God, while the devil is just a creature. Unfortunately, Father Zerudo says that there are many cases of actual possessions here in the Philippines. That is why he strongly advises people to refrain from being involved with the occult, things like playing with Ouija board, opening the third eye, that sort of thing. That's the most dangerous thing you could ever do, he said. He also asks people who might suspect possession to seek medical attention first, and not that of faith healers or so-called abueleros. That's kind of like a quack doctor. That's what they call them, but they're quite well respected here in the Philippines. Nevertheless, he says stay away. So there you have it. That's this morning's story on All Saints Day here in the Philippines. And he sounds like he would be a very, very interesting guest, doesn't he? So I'll have to look into that. An exorcist here in the Philippines. I'm Art Bell, and this is Ghost to Ghost AM. That means that when we open the line shortly, it's just going to be you and me. That's it. You're going to have the opportunity to call in and tell a ghost story, a single ghost story. No multiple stories, just one. Pick your best one and tell it like it happened. So the evening through, it'll be all open lines. We are going to use a screener. So you might just give a very short version and try and tantalize my screener, upping your odds of getting through. Rarely do I use a screener, but for the purposes of Ghost to Ghost AM, it does make sense. So say hi to Gina when you call. She'll be the one you have to convince that your story is really, really creepy. With that, we'll take a quick break and be right back. As you may or may not know, I received some ghost stories by email, and I thought this one was appropriate. As you know, I'm a ham operator, got a new license over here in the Philippines. I'm 4F1AB. How's that for appropriate, huh? Pretty cool call. Actually, it's a very cool call that I'm proud of. Had to take the test to get it over here. The Philippine test. 4 Foxtrot 1 Alpha Bravo. Anyway, this relates, so I thought I'd read it. My father, this comes from Dale in Lincoln, Nebraska. My father was an avid ham radio operator, KA0, and then I'm not going to give the rest of the call letters. He had built a radio shack in the backyard that he used as a getaway, when he wanted to spend some time on the radio. My father died April 22nd of 87 at the age of 53. He had a massive heart attack. About a week and a half after his death, I just needed to get away from all the people coming and going at the house after he died. So I went out to the shack to watch TV and to listen to his radio. It was about 9:20 in the evening, and there was a little local chatter going on, and I was only half listening to that. All of a sudden, I heard someone calling my father's call sign. Not having a ham license, I didn't respond. About 30 minutes later, I heard someone calling for my father. The person who first called him came back to the second person and told them he wasn't around. The second person said something about my father had talked to him the night before and said that he'd be around at about this time. First person said my father had talked to him also the night before and said the same thing. Knowing that it was wrong, I felt, nevertheless, I needed to let these guys know about my father. I got on the radio and let these guys know my father had died on the 22nd. They talked to me about having talked to my father many times in the last week and how he'd set up times for them to be around. While we were talking, 3 more people came on and told me that my father had talked to them also. After about an hour of talking to all of them answering their questions and receiving well wishes and condolences, I logged off the radio using my father's call sign for one last time. I guess he loved the radio so much that he needed to stick around for a short time to say his goodbyes. You can imagine that one got me. All right, let me give you a very quick version of the phone numbers to give us your ghost stories, your various ghost stories. And there's no shortage of ghost stories. And that also should tell you something. I mean, it really should tell you something. The fact that there are so many ghost stories, that it just never ends, that we open the lines and they come trooping through, some better than others. Hopefully this is a night full of good ones. But if you've got one you'd like to relate, west of the Rockies, 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers, love you. Area code 818-501-4721. If we really loved you, we'd have a toll-free number for you, too, huh? Wild card line, we have many of those. Area code 818-501-4109. This is old. I hope they haven't changed. And the international line, no matter where you are, and we're on the air all the way out here toward the Pacific to Guam, and most of the way toward Europe. International lines, 1-800-893-0903. You know, get hold of your international operator, AT&T, tell her you want. 1-800-893-0903. And I'll sprinkle some of these additional ghost stories that I've got through email, kind of through the show as we go. But for now, let us begin with a wild card line. Good morning. You are on the air.
Oh, okay. This is me?
Only you know that for certain, but it sounds like you, yes.
Okay. Well, I'll try to be as fluid as you were with your story. Art, my story goes back about 20 years ago, and I was spending time with my girlfriend from college, and certainly wasn't allowed to sleep in the same bedroom as hers because her father was very strict, and so I had to sleep on the couch in the living room.
Good for her dad.
Yeah. And not to mention, her father was an auxiliary cop, and he kept a handgun in his nightstand. So there was always this thing about if he ever catches me in there, he's going to kill me. You know, literally.
Uh-huh.
So long
he
story
probably
short,
would have too.
Yeah. So long story short is, one night I'm sleeping on the couch, and I look over her parents' bedroom door is across from the living room. There's a hallway, and then there's his bedroom. And all of a sudden, I thought I saw her mother getting up in her nightgown to go prepare him breakfast because he got up really early in the morning to go to the city for a job that he had down in the city. And I'm looking at it, and I'm trying to see, make out details of the way she looks, and of her figure, and it was transparent, so I really couldn't see her, the detail, and I realized that it was a ghost, and I was just staring. I was rubbing my eyes, and I was, shutting my eyes and opening them and everything like this, and this was going on for a couple minutes, and now I'm petrified. I couldn't even move.
Yeah, it's come on, eyes, work properly.
Yeah, exactly. And so the ghost sensed my presence there, and it actually was sticking his head through their bedroom door. And so that's the reason why I was having a hard time making out the details. And so when he turned around, he saw me, and it was this bearded man with a really funny hat, and he was yelling at me, but there was no sound. And
you're saying that his head was actually sort of halfway through the solid door?
Yeah, and I realized this afterwards. That's what he was doing. Because I'll explain that to you in a second. So anyway, I got to the point where I'm laying. I pulled the blankets over my head, and I'm just laying there. I can't stay here. So I ran into my girlfriend's bedroom, even though I knew I can get shot going in there. And I spent
well, that tells me how scared you were. I mean, you're risking getting shot rather than looking at whatever that was.
Exactly. So I told my girlfriend, and next thing I know, it's like getting, close to dawn, and her mother's waking up to prepare her father breakfast as she normally does. And then I knew he was going to be coming out any minute. So he comes out, and he's in the having his breakfast, and all of a sudden I hear him say, "What is he doing in there?" And I'm like,
"Oh yeah."
And I said, "You got to go out there and tell him what happened."
Please, I'll hide under the bed. You go.
So now he's calling me into the kitchen, and I'm thinking to kill me. And he goes, "John, is it true that you saw a ghost?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, I believe you." And I said, then he started to explain to me that, like, for years he'd be getting dressed, looking in his mirror, and he would see something like in the mirror behind him, and he would turn around and it would disappear, and that this thing was like playing this trick on him for like years and years. So, the fact that he, this guy, he's like a macho type, and that he admitted this to me, and it was pretty remarkable.
History or no history, had it been me, you'd have been dead.
Okay, I'll remember that.
All right, listen, thank you very, very much for the first ghost story tonight.
Thank you.
And take care. It's a good thing there was a history, or he'd probably be dead. He'd be the one to be the ghost. Oh, gosh. All right, wild card line, without a name, you're a ghost, I guess, until we catch up with you. You're on the air.
Hello, Art?
Yes, hi.
Hi, this is Crystal from San Diego.
Hello, Crystal. How's San Diego? Eternal springtime, right?
Oh, yes. It is beautiful here all the time. We are so spoiled.
I know.
It's so lovely to talk to you. I listen to the show all the time.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. You have a ghost story, Crystal.
Yes, I do. I grew up in a haunted house. And when I was about 6 years old, I was making my bed. And I would, stand up at the head of the bed and pick up the covers and, pull them up in the air and try to make them fall down flat on the bed.
Ah, yes.
And I was doing that, and the covers kept falling off to the side. And I would try again and again and again, and they just kept falling off to the side. And I got really frustrated. And I was standing up there, and I just, out of frustration, I said, "Won't somebody please help me with this?"
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, I knew nobody was going to help me. I'm an only child. My parents in the living room, they can't hear me. So I was like, okay, one more time. And I grabbed the covers, and I pulled them up into the air. And just as they start to come down, the two corners at the foot of the bed stay up in the air.
Oh, my God.
And I'm standing there holding my end up, absolutely stunned, just staring at the other end of the blanket staying up in the air.
Yeah, somebody was helping.
Yes. And I stood there for a while, and, the blanket is dished down in the middle of it, sitting on the bed, and I'm just standing there holding my end up, looking at the other end up. And, yeah. So then I was like, oh, okay. And I put my end down, and just as I put my side down, the other side goes down. And I was really glad that the ghost helped me, and at the same time, scared out of my wits.
Well, it's one of those careful what you ask for things.
Yeah, because I definitely asked for it.
And how old were you at the time? I'm sorry.
I was about 6 years old.
About 6.
Yeah.
Such thing never occurs when you're older, when you sort of wish out loud for somebody to assist you in some way or another. Never happens, but for a 6-year-old...
I guess from the heart of a child, right?
The heart of a child, indeed so. Oh, that's a wonderful story. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting
take
me
care.
on.
Can you imagine, your covers up, covers come down to one side, then the other side, then the other side. Will someone help me? And then the bottom covers are standing in the air. Now, that would freak you out. Certainly would freak me out. Sometimes I wonder why our children are blessed with more frequent occurrences like this. And sometimes I think, well, it may be because they have not been taught yet that this kind of thing just can't happen. Just doesn't happen. But as they get older and older, everybody says, oh, that's baloney. That kind of stuff can't be. It's not true. But it is true until you're taught it cannot be true. So those are just the first covers from the first stories of a night of ghost stories. It's All Saints Day here, Halloween where you are. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. Indeed, I am here. How appropriate is that bumper music? No need to fear the Reaper. He's all around us, as is the Lord. Giveth and take away, right? We're doing ghost stories tonight. If you have a compelling, scary ghost story, we want to hear you. We want to hear from you. And Gina is our, she's screening the call, so she's the one you've got to convince that you've got something hot. Now, I forgot to remind you that there is indeed a new photograph on coasttocoastam.com of Miss Asia Bell in her Snow White outfit for, we had a party here. Our condominium corporation had a party, and she went to it, and that was her Halloween costume, and she was Snow White. One quick story that came by email, Art. I've been waiting to share my story with you for a lot of years. I grew up in Sacramento, California, and at 12 years old in the late 50s, we lived in one of these old houses built in the 1900s. It was a two-story with many bedrooms. Being one of the oldest of 5 girls. Can you imagine 5 girls? I've got one. Imagining 5 is terrifying in itself. I got my own room, she says. Us girls always had some sibling conflicts going on. We weren't very gentle with each other. It was a warm, moonlit night. My bed faced the window. I had the window open. Light from outside slightly lit up the room so you could make things out in the room. I was under the sheet, not asleep yet. Looked at the foot of my bed, saw what I thought was one of my sisters sitting there. My sister was about the same age, 8 years old, and also had long brown hair. This girl was wearing a white dress, lots of ruffles, sort of olden style, just sitting there at the edge of my bed with her back to me, looking out the window. And I said, "What are you doing?" "Get off my bed." She didn't move. She did nothing. I said again, "Get off my bed," this time with my foot under the cover. I aimed my foot at her back and her bottom to shove her off. Or my foot went right through her into the air. I gasped in shock, too afraid to scream, pulled the covers over my head, too scared to move, not knowing what I saw. From that point on, I was terrified something was going to happen to my sister. I never told anyone into my adult life years later. Over the years, my father told us the family who had lived there before us had lost a little girl. Took me years to put it all together, but now I know that's who I was trying to shove off my bed. That's from Deanie, by the way. Did you know there was a ghost story associated with Ted Bundy? We'll get to that one. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Good morning. Where are you, please?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm in southeastern Oregon.
Okay.
And the story I have is about 15, 16 years old. I was 20, and right after first getting married, I was in central Florida, south of my hometown of St. Augustine. And being from a native family there for many years, I'm a Menorcan, and we kind of study our history and know who we all are, and the fact that, there was lots of traders and things. And that's why this story is so detrimental to me. I mean, since then I've had a lot of encounters, but they've all been pretty positive. And the first encounter I had was a murderous encounter. And I had an apparition try to kill me when I was 19, 20 years old. Laying in bed, my father-in-law's house after being married. It was the holidays in the back room, and the room we were in was kind of small, and kind of had to enter the room around the dresser, which was right at the edge of the threshold of the door, late at night, probably close to midnight like it is now, and ambient light from the hallway in the bathroom so people could see to get around the house. And I'm laying in bed thinking about the holiday season that's coming and the family that I'm meeting that I haven't met before and things like that. And I see this body open the edge of the door and enter the room, and instead of stepping around the dresser, which is how you would have to get to the edge of the bed where I was, it just kind of passed through the dresser.
Oh.
I'm looking into the dark, and all I can see is this dark figure with the light behind it, and my eyes are focusing, and it's dark hair and kind of a ceremonial-looking headdress, similar to the most popular picture of Osceola, with the white banner and the feather hanging off of it, and it's wearing white clothing like a French trader would maybe give to somebody for what animal furs they might have. And I'm looking really hard at this, and I'm thinking, well, this is one of the members of the family, and they're in a towel, got a towel around their head, just came out of the shower or something, and maybe nightgown and coming to say goodnight to my wife. And I looked, and he's holding a bone knife, and a quite large knife, and at that time, I'm just motionless. I can't move. I don't even know if I was breathing, but my eyes were wide open, and I'm staring at this thing. And he's raising the knife. It's clear he's coming for me, and I didn't know what to do. So I screamed, and I reached out. And as I reached out, it was gone. I get up, turn the light on. My father-in-law gets up. I screamed loud enough it woke everybody in the house up who may have been sleeping. And he's going through the house with a pistol and looking around for any intruder or anything like that. Nobody there. I spent quite a few days just trying to remember and get this.
You have to wonder, if he hadn't disappeared, and he had in fact killed you, there might have been no sign that it was a murder at all. In other words, that ceremonial bone knife might have gone into you, and I don't know, when the coroner looked at you, it might have been just another heart attack.
That's exactly what I thought. Years later, I thought, thinking back about that, I did exactly that. I thought, this is kind of like a ceremonial sacrifice. It turns out later that part of Central Florida that I was in was a large hunting ground for the Seminole and Creek Indian tribes, and then later became a reservation for a lot of South Indian tribes that were moved into the tip of Florida.
Maybe they weren't so pleased.
I wonder if maybe he wasn't mad that we were there.
There you go. That's it exactly. And then just one more note. A lot of people die in their sleep, right? Well, how do we know that they weren't killed, or perhaps even scared to death by something like he just described? But, when you're on the slab with a toe tag, that's just another heart attack. So there's no way we can know. And you might not even need the ceremonial knife because you'd be scared to death. Let's go west of the Rockies, I do believe. You're on the air. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going, Art Bell?
I'm sorry, say again, hon?
Hello, how's it going, Art Bell?
It's going just fine. What is your name, first name?
My name is Lily, and I'm in Anchorage.
Anchorage, Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And so my story is, in 2007, I was 6, and I had to stay home from school. So I had to go downstairs with my grandma, which is, our houses are on top of each other, kind of like a condo or something.
Right.
And so I was on her bed, and there's this hall between her office and her bedroom. And then at the end of the hall, there's this bathroom, and I see this man. He was kind of transparent, and I'm like, what the heck? Who's in the house? So I'm like, I just come up with the reason, and I saw these really, really old-looking buckle shoes. I'm like, hey, that man's probably dead, and he's a ghost. Because I'm not sure why, but I just thought about it.
Well, if he's kind of transparent, that's a big hint right there.
Yep. And then the old buckle shoes that he was wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I run into my grandma's office where she was, and I told her, and she's like, oh, really? So I'm like, I'm going to tell my mom, and so I did, and, well, things have just been happening ever since.
Ever since?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Like, one night my mom and my sister kept coming into my room, and I was asleep, and they kept flipping on and off the lights. So once they finally left, the light flipped on unexpectedly, and I thought it was my mom. So I run to her, and I ask her, were you just in my bedroom? And she says no. And who knows what did that.
Boy, I've got to say, for somebody your age, you're pretty brave.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you for the story, and you take care, okay?
Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye. The young ones. Happens to the young ones. And maybe it doesn't have as much to do with bravery as it does with just acceptance. When you're really young, you just accept a lot of things. I mean, my daughter, who is now 3 years and 5 months. Oh, by the way, you can sure see a good picture of her. And what they did tonight was very interesting. I sent the current photograph, and they put a series of photographs by it that date all the way back to 2007, so you can see her growing up. It's kind of cool. And so that's all on coasttocoastam.com, along with a lot of Halloween-related kind of stuff. But you can see her since she was a baby, you know. They just selected some pictures along the way, and you can literally see her growing up. Really cool. East of the Rockies, top of the well, no, I'll tell you what. East of the Rockies, hold tight for a moment. We're going to do a break, and then we'll go east of the Rockies. You know, Asia lives in her imagination a lot of the time. It's a really good imagination. In fact, it must be a wonderful world. So if you were to see something like that at a young age, it seems to me it would just be a component part of your imagination, or you would interpret it that way. And you might not stop seeing these things until you were taught that you ought not be seeing them. East of the Rockies, let's give it a try now. You're on the air. Hi. Hello. Are you there? Yes.
Hey, this is Chris in Massachusetts.
Hello.
It's an honor and a privilege.
How's Massachusetts this morning?
It's pretty chilly. Real cold.
Yeah, good.
Not like that for you, huh?
Not like that for me, no. It is beginning, we're in the cooler part of it. It's beginning to cool down a little bit here, but we're still probably about 30, 32 degrees centigrade, something like that.
Oh, yeah, it's real cold here. I just wanted to tell you, I was messing around on the computer, and about 2 hours ago I came across, I guess this organization went after some of the information related to the 9/11 stuff, the footage, video, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I guess they ended up through the courts or whatever, they received a bunch of this material from the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Right.
It's a NIST. I guess it's a collection of 6,500 video clips, and it's just a ton of data. It's actually 924 gigabytes of information.
Holy smokes.
So
right.
I guess these different groups are kind of sparsing it out and having people start to look at it and try to go through it and see if they see any strange stuff. So it's so huge. I started looking at it, and I just picked this little clip. It was like a 2 gigabyte clip, and it had probably, I don't know, maybe 100 videos in it. So I just started going through them, and I got to video 147, and I don't know what to say. It starts off this black, it looks like a ghost. There's no other thing to call it. This big black thing shoots up to one of the buildings. It slides along the side of the building, then shoots down at a 45-degree angle, shoots over to the other building, wraps around it, and then shoots down at a 45-degree angle. And
holy smokes!
And it's government footage. It's
I understand. Listen, there were a number of anomalous things like that that were captured during the 9/11 terrorist attack. Some of them involved animals that shouldn't have been there in flight. Some of them involved things like you're describing right now, and odd lights and really strange things. And I guess around really big tragedies like that, these things tend to occur. What have you done with it?
Like I said, I literally came across it maybe 40 minutes ago.
40 minutes ago. What you should do is send it to Coast AM.
Okay.
I think we all want to see it. And I'm not surprised to hear about it, but I certainly appreciate your call and relating that. And please do send it on to the website. That was a really odd time, wasn't it? I, of course, was here on the air with you. And that's how I know there were so many anomalous things that occurred during that time. All right, let's go. Where are we going? Houston, Texas, and John. Hi, John.
Hey, Art. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Thank you.
My father was classically educated by the Franciscan monks, and as such, he spoke Latin, though he wasn't fluent. He understood it and spoke it. Even years later, when I was in law school, he knew more Latin than I did. He also loved your show, Art, and he would listen almost every night. When I would talk to him, he would often talk about guests and topics from your show. He even had a favorite story that he would tell from his days in the Army when he was in Alaska. But he died on 13 April 1999 from complications following surgery from which he never recovered.
Right.
The night of his visitation, I left the funeral home and drove about 50 miles back to Houston. And when I got home, I let the dog out on the patio by the pool. And I was looking in the den out the patio window when walking out of the shadows walked a lemur. Now, lemurs are indigenous to Madagascar, and I was at least a couple of miles away from the zoo. But this lemur looked at me. It stopped and looked at me, and its face, while in animals, looked at me with an acknowledgement as though it were human. It wasn't smiling, but it had a calmness that was oddly reassuring. I just froze. I stood there, and it walked past the window. It continued walking slowly. It never ran. It just walked slowly. The dog, who was still out on the patio, was a Great Pyrenees. Never barked. It never looked at it or anything. And the lemur just walked on past the patio door, but it never stopped. When I ran past the patio door and ran to the kitchen to look out the window to see where it went, I couldn't see it anymore. And so I went on the internet to verify that what I saw was indeed a lemur. And the pictures confirmed it was a lemur. But then I read something really chilling, and that was that the word lemur comes from the Latin word lemure, which means walking dead.
Wow. Well, there are many times strange animal appearances associated with the death of somebody close or a loved one. In my father's case, a bat came to us. And that bat stayed all day and then left that night. It was so odd. So I'm not surprised, but I'm sure that you'll never forget it.
Oh, I certainly believe that my father chose to come to me as that lemur to let me know and assure me that he was okay.
Either that's the case or that's what your mind decided it meant. Either way, it certainly was reassuring. That's a wonderful story. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Take care. That really is quite a story. And I bet there's a million stories like that out there. On the morning of my father's passing, a bat came to us, just really odd, out in the desert, landed right on our porch in the sun. He was okay. The bat was okay. There was nothing wrong with that bat. He just decided to land right on our porch, right in front of our front door, We picked him up. That's right, we picked him up and carried him to the shade where he remained during the day. And then that night, once the sun had set and the desert was quiet, he flew away. But he stayed all day long on the day of my father's death. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. Good morning, everybody. It is Ghost to Ghost AM. All we're doing is telling ghost stories. If you've got a good one, and I mean a good one, then give us a call. Try and scare Gina. She's the call screener. If you can scare Gina, you'll get on the air. George, during the break, was talking about constructed terrorism for the purpose of, well, taking rights. And while I don't totally subscribe to that theory, I do want to reference something for you. If you want something that'll send a chill down your spine, go back and watch the movie The Long Kiss Goodnight. Gena Rowlands. The Long Kiss Goodnight. There is a line in there. It was made, I think, back in 96, 97, 96, I think. And there was a line in there about the trade centers, and, well, if they didn't get it right the first time, they'd just have to do it again and kill 4,000 people. And it was really, really eerie. And it was said by somebody who, in that movie, represented some rogue part of the government. And they wanted to do this so they could, prosecute the war on terror with more fervor. It is a freaky line. It's in Long Kiss Goodnight. Check it out. Then there's this. Ted Bundy, one of the most savage, awful serial killers in America's history. In April of 2001, a guard retired from the Florida State Prison at Relford, Florida. It was with the condition that no one reveal his name. He told his story to a Tampa newspaper reporter, and it was strange and it was spooky. It's all about the ghost of Ted Bundy sitting in the electric chair. Not as he waited to be executed, but after. He stated that shortly after Ted Bundy was put to death in the Florida electric chair, that guards, including himself, would go into the room where the electric chair was located, and there'd Ted be sitting in the chair. He would not be strapped in or anything like that. He'd just be sitting there smiling at whoever came in the room like he knew a secret. When you'd approach the chair or speak, he'd simply vanish. At one point, the former guard said it got so bad that you couldn't get a guard to go into the room. Other guards began to report that they'd see Ted in the area of his former cell where, he spent the last hours of his life. Some claimed he spoke to them, and all reported he said the same thing, which was, "Well, I beat all of you, didn't I?" The former guard said the warden and the warden's staff went guard to guard and told them that any guard who reported what was going on at that prison would find himself out of a job, fired. Several didn't have to be warned. They quit after seeing Ted a time or two. And the former guard said Ted was not the only ghost at Stark haunting the prison. We're going to take a break and get back to your ghost stories. Just a couple of fast items. Speaking of languages, I just got a fast blast asking about my daughter Asia and what she's learning language-wise. And the answer is she's learning 4 languages. It's really something in the house because it comes out in a big mixture. She's learning a Bisaya, which is my wife's language, from Mindanao. She's learning Ilongo because we have a Yaya who is Ilongo, and so she teaches her Ilongo. And she's learning, of course, Tagalog, and then she's learning English. So 4 languages. And we read an interesting article recently which said that children, very young children like Asia, can be exposed to multiple languages when they're infants. And that by the time they become 5 or 6, this was a very recent study, they begin in their brain to separate the languages and are able to speak all of them. So right now, it's kind of interesting because it sort of comes out in a great mixture of different languages. He's learning them all. And then one more item. This is from the news, and I'm breaking a long tradition by reading this to you, but it's the Associated Press current 5-minute summary of the news, and it's impossible for me not to relate this to you. And you might want to get up on the internet and download the full article, which I have not yet done. But here it is. There's a study from England this morning. The headline is Alcohol More Lethal Than Heroin or Cocaine. From London, the Associated Press. Alcohol is more dangerous than illegal drugs like heroin and crack cocaine, according to a new study. British experts evaluated substances including alcohol, cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, and marijuana, ranking them based on how destructive they are to the individual who takes them and to society as a whole. So next time you bend the elbow, think about that a little bit. Alcohol, more dangerous than heroin and crack cocaine and, of course, marijuana. So I don't know. I think the U.S. is moving in the right direction. This drug war has got to eventually end. We legalize alcohol, and it is by far the most dangerous drug. That's something to think about this morning. All right, back to the lines, back to your ghost stories. It is the wild card line, and Evo in San Francisco, who needs to please turn your radio off.
Yeah, the radio is off.
Okay.
Hello, Art.
Hi.
Hi, I've got a story for you, and it concerns a church ghost story. And in fact, you just had talked about England, and it occurred in London.
Oh, okay.
So to begin with, I'm not a super psychic person, but every now and then I get these sort of glimpses, these feelings. And in 1994, I was on a tour with the Glee Club that I had been a part of back in Michigan. And when we were on tour, we had some time to do some sightseeing, and we stopped off at this one cathedral, and very beautiful Gothic style. And on the main floor of the cathedral, there I guess you would call them like mausoleums, where they had buried people in the church itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taking some photographs of those mausoleums, and I started to feel something. And if you want, I could tell you more about that later. But I proceeded to go to the second level of the church. Now, this church was really dark inside. I just remember black and brown, just very dark, stained glass windows, but they were small stained glass windows that just let in a little bit of light. And when I was on this second level in the church, they had these rooms, and I decided to go into this one room, and there was some people that were exiting the room, and I went in, and it was just myself in the room, and there was like a pew where you could kneel down and pray, and there was a very small stained glass window off to one side, just letting in a little bit of light, and it's an old cathedral, I don't know how many hundreds of years old, very dusty, kind of smelling, and sort of damp, mildew-like. And I just recall when I was in the room, I could literally hear a voice telling me to get out, you need to leave, just get out, go away. It was really strong.
Mm-hmm.
And it was literally like I could hear a voice telling me to do this. So, I went ahead and did. I felt extremely uncomfortable, and I just felt like this energy was sort of surrounding me. And I said, "Okay, I'm cool. I can hear what you're saying. I'm going to leave." So I left. I was leaving this room, and as I was leaving, there was a couple of buddies that were with me. They were walking down the hallway, and they saw me leaving this room. And I was sort of standing next to the door, and they were looking at me, and they said, "Well, what's up? You look kind of funny." And I said, "Well, you might think this is nuts, but I'm telling you, this. I went in the room, and I could feel these feelings, and something's telling me to get out, so I got out of there." Mm-hmm. And then the next thing I know, they were looking sort of past me, and looking over my shoulder. And then I asked them, I said, well, what are you looking at? And they said, well, why don't you turn around and look? So I turned around, and there was a plaque next to the door. And I don't recall what year that it happened in. It was probably a couple hundred years ago. But the plaque on the door had stated that in such and such a year, someone was beheaded in that room.
Well, okay. You know what? I absolutely believe you, and here's why. We just did a show on EVP, electronic voice phenomena, and through the years, I don't know how many times, some voice, I guess a ghost, has told them to get the hell out. So that you would feel that, or feel that some entity was telling you to get out, is not a surprise. It's a frequent message that comes from the other side, if you will, if that's where it is, the other side, whatever it is. It doesn't want you there. And if it doesn't want you there and you feel that, you had best get the hell out. Let's go to Texas and Agnes. Agnes, hi.
Hello, Art. It's wonderful to speak with you. You don't know how many years I've listened to you.
I try not to think about it.
Yeah, I know. I feel the same way, but I have to tell the truth. Years ago, my husband had passed away, and before he died, he told me, I just got two quick things. Before he died, he told me to watch out for black butterflies. And
I don't think I've ever seen a black butterfly.
Black butterflies down here in Texas. And in the mornings, and even today, I'll be somewhere, it doesn't make any difference where it's at, and more times than not, I will see a black butterfly. Also, there was a smashed image of a face in the window, which that scared the heck out of me. And if anybody can help me understand what that was about, it was right there in the bedroom window, and it was like a smashed face. Like, I don't know if that was him, trying to, tell me that he was, visiting or what. But I'd appreciate some guidance. And also, after he had passed, I took care of an elderly man, in his 80s, retired colonel, and for some reason, he would get in a bad mood, and his voice would change, and he'd start blaspheming and saying all kinds of horrible things. And I had a friend over one day, and I got so frustrated. Here he was breaking the dishes, I made lunch and everything, right. and so finally it occurred to my friend and myself that, he might have been possessed. So I knew that I had seen something on a program where there was a passage out of the Bible used, and I went through, and he grabbed the camera, one of those instant developing, cameras that pushes out the film.
Right, Polaroids.
And, yeah. Anyway, so I'm there going through this, and I keep repeating this to the old man. And as I'm doing this, the gentleman at the house, he's taking in these numerous pictures, and you could actually see when the pictures developed that there was a mist. It was a grayish-white mist and an outline of a man in a hat with a cape. And as I was saying this more and more, this chant over and over again, this mist went into the floor and actually disappeared. The old man fell asleep, and I never had a problem with him again after that. So
do you still have one of those photographs?
Yeah, I sure do.
We would love to get a copy, so please send it off to Coast AM, particularly if it's a Polaroid. Those were virtually impossible to fake. Not so anymore. Of course, now we have Photoshop, and, oh gosh, people can do just about anything with photographs. But a Polaroid? in the sense of, hey, I've got proof. Polaroids were the gold standard. Long now gone, of course. California, Brian, hello.
Hi, Art.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my ghost story happened about 15 years ago. I was in my living room, and I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. My parents were very heavy religious people, and basically what happened is I was sitting in my living room, all the lights are on, and I'm talking with my friend on the phone, and I was kind of in a transitional period right now where I was kind of growing out of the religious aspects and kind of questioning everything, and I would always kind of pray, like, let there give me a sign that there is something past this life and that there is something. And I was sitting on the phone, and there was like this little dot. It started off like a gray matter kind of in the corner of my vision, and I thought it was something wrong with my eyes. So for a long time, I kept trying to wipe them. I put water in them, and I came back to talk on the phone, and it was still there, but it was in the corner.
Right.
And as I gained, like, it started to freak me out, it started to get bigger. And I didn't know how to take it, so I was telling the person on the phone, like, hey, man, this, like, thing's growing in the corner of my vision, and I can't stop it. And as I got more afraid of it, it became bigger and bigger. And as I looked at it, it began to materialize into what I could barely tell was a face. And as the fear continually grew, it started to become more relevant in my vision, and I would look at it, and it would take on a newer, clearer form. And from what I could see in its face, it didn't look human. It looked like the best I've been able to explain to family and friends is like a punch doll's face. And it freaked me out because I couldn't tell what it was, but I was like, is this real? What's going on? And my mind's going in like a million directions.
Yeah, boy, this is a new one for me. I've never heard of this, and I do indeed understand what you're talking about. It was something in your eye. In other words, it was in your own vision. How long did it last?
This is what's creepy. It lasted for, I lost count of time, but it couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes. It took about 10 minutes overall, but 2 minutes to materialize into something that I don't know if I fed it fear and it was able to materialize through it or how it happened, but I've never seen anything since or after this, but at the tip of my experience, I looked at it, and right before I ran out of the room, right through it, it looked like about 4 or 5 feet tall, and this is the thing I battled with, is it went around the corner, and it was holding on to it, smiling at me. So I tried to think about what the heck was this thing, and it was either taunting me, messing with me, or doing something. And
well, remember, you ask and ye shall receive. You asked for a sign, right?
Right. And I absolutely got something. But I would think if it was something of God, it would have been something that would have been less frightening. This was definitely
apparition of
really
Mary or something like that. But what you got was not necessarily from our Lord.
No. And that's the thing, is it got weirder because I woke up my mother, I told her the situation, and she's like, oh, well, did you bring a demon into the house? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, so I go to sleep, and I've got every light on in the house, and my parents' door is wide open, and I fall asleep. I wake up in my dream. I'm in my house, exactly where I slept. I got up, walked to my front door, and it kind of goes straight, and then there's like a hallway in the living room I was in. Well,
very
outside,
quickly, we're out of time here.
Oh, no problem. There was like an abyss outside, and I saw what looked like a Pope's hat going by, but it was something screaming for me to come outside. And my parents came and fell on their knees and were like, what did you bring to our house? And I woke up.
Oh, man, what a story. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. You can kind of feel it in the air, can't you? A more crisp crackling of the air on a night like this, Halloween. Yeah, it is there. It really is. This came in the email. When I was 8 years old, I lived in a small home in Terre Haute, Indiana. Woke up one morning about 3 a.m. to see an apparition of a military soldier standing right in front of my bed. The supposed ghost was in full military gear as if he was ready for war. It looked at me and said, "What the hell are you doing by my bed?" I looked down to my right side and saw a military-style bunk on my bedroom floor. I looked back at the spirit, and it vanished. 12 years later, I joined the Air Force. As I went through the years, I found myself on a training mission in Fort Dix, New Jersey. One evening, as I was retiring to my bunk, a young airman was going through some of my things near the bed. I asked him, "What the hell are you doing by my bed?" And now I wonder, could that ghost have been me at a future time? Thank you, Ryan from Indiana. That's kind of an interesting thing to contemplate, isn't it? That you, in effect, haunted yourself. All right, onward we go. Corpus Christi, Texas brings Joseph. Hi, Joseph. How are you this morning?
Oh, Art, I'm doing quite well. I've been a big fan of yours since I was 10 years old, and I've been listening to your show ever since.
How old are you now? Well, I don't want to know.
20, I'm 27 right now.
27. Okay.
And I just want to let you know a scary story that I have experienced when I was 10. I remember over at my mom's boyfriend's house, I was getting ready to go to sleep. For some reason, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning all night long.
Okay. All right, we're back. It happens every now and then. The ghost in the machine, don't you know? Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, you were 10.
Yes, I was 10. I was at my mom's boyfriend's house, and I was trying to go to sleep, but I couldn't fall asleep. And then as soon as I was ready to fall asleep, I saw something with a foot in my head. It was about 6-7 feet tall, had a white hood on with a black face, and it looked like it was getting ready to come towards at me. So I was like frozen stiff, didn't know what to do. I pulled the covers on my head. 5 seconds later, it disappeared. So I thought nothing of it. I thought, okay, we have seen things, whatever. Didn't think nothing of it. I let it go. And then 6 months later, it reappeared. And to this day, I can't figure out why it kept reappearing towards me. I was trying to figure out what it is.
Okay, well, the last chapter of that story may not have been written, and this may be something that'll be with you all your life. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. But that does happen. In other words, something that you see, some apparition, can appear years later, and then years later again, and then perhaps years later again, and then finally the meaning of it all will sink in on you. Listen, not that I don't appreciate ghost stories. I certainly do. Better buy a real phone. If you have a choice to use a cell phone or a real phone, use a real phone. It sounds so very much better on the air. But I understand there are some of you who, well, have no choice. It's a cellular world we live in now. Chicago brings Greg. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning, Art. How are you doing?
Very well indeed, thank you.
I am part of that new generation. I have a cell phone only, no regular landline phone. But anyways, so I was calling actually a week ago, Sunday. I photographed what I consider to be a ghost. I'm going around the city of Chicago photographing. I don't know if you know, probably you do, that there's quite the murder rampage going on right now in Chicago. And so I'm photographing all the different murder scenes. And I photographed one a week ago in using a photograph from the newspaper to identify the exact location. I'm going back to these locations and where the blood is on the sidewalk in the newspaper photograph. I went back and photographed it, and right above that exact same spot is this really weird, ghostly, sparkly image thing. And I'm not using, you talked about Photoshop and all that stuff earlier. I'm using, negative film. I'm processing all my own stuff in the darkroom.
All right.
So it's really strange.
At how many of these scenes have you photographed something anomalous?
So far, I've only photographed 3. Like I said, I just started doing this last week. This was the very first one that I photographed. I've developed all three of them. This is the only one that has anything in it so far. But it is eerie that it's the very first one that I did.
Well, listen, number one, I'm not surprised. And number two, advice to you, as I've given the others, please, if you get a good photograph, something really hot, send it off to coasttocoastam.com.
Yeah, of course I will.
All right, thank you very much. That's kind of a strange hobby, isn't it? Live in a violent city, sort of making note of where the murders have occurred and going to take photographs of it all. Oh, boy, that's strange. But I do understand, because hauntings tend to occur around the scene of violent death. It's always been true. And it does cause one to wonder why that would be. And I guess one of the answers would be that it is such a shock to the victim to be killed that for some reason there is more likely to be a haunting. There's more likely to be a person who has not yet moved on. Colorado brings Scott. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Welcome down, hop on, Art Bell. How are you?
Just very well, sir. Thank you.
Good. You make me jealous being over there in the Philippines. I wish I was over there right now. I was wondering if somebody threw some pancita in your dish up there when you had that outage.
It happens every now and then. As I said, the ghost in the machine, who knows? We're going from one side of the world to the other. It's a pretty long haul.
Well, if you don't have a UPS backup, you might have some power fluctuations, too, over there. You never can tell. But anyway, my experience happened actually there in the Philippines in Bayawan City, which is in Negros Oriental.
Down in Mindanao. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, anyways, I had a girlfriend over there staying in her house, and I always wanted to walk across this rice field, which they had a path and a little bridge and stuff like that, out over to the ocean. And she's like, no, the mumu, which is witch. That's their name for witch. I said, oh, come on, I'll be fine. She goes, no. I said, okay, we'll go tonight. No. So I talked her in going over there, and we walked down this path, and we got to the little wooden bridge. She goes, oh, look at the little fishes. So we both got on our hands and knees on this little bridge and looked at this little pool off to the side of the stream at the fish, and all of a sudden there was a third image behind us, like another person. I whipped around, and of course the image was gone. And at that time, I fell in the water. She grabbed a hold of me and fell in the water at the same time. She goes, what was that? What did you whip around for? So I told her. She goes, well, that was probably my grandmother. I said, no, your grandmother? And she goes, yeah. She's been known to be seen around here. So I didn't think much of it, and I said, okay, her and her moo-moo and her grandma and all this stuff. So later that evening, after having much too much Tanduay, which is the number one rum, the houses are very close together, and right next to her place, there's probably about 6 foot span between the walls, is her cousin Marvin's. So I had to get up out of bed and go to the bathroom, and he had a little night light on, so I'm going to the bathroom, and there's the little window with the grill and stuff like that, and I kind of peered over to see if, anybody was up at Marvin's or if they were looking over or whatever, and all of a sudden this image appears again in the window, and it starts merging through the wall. And I'm going, what? Who are you? Get out of here! I'm still drunk on Tanduay, And after a couple of these shouts, stuff like that, about that time, the door opens to the CR, which is comfort room or bathroom for those who don't know. And I was so startled that it whipped around, and of course it was my girlfriend, except she startled me in the middle of, going to the bathroom, so guess what? She got soaked. But anyway, that was my story. Didn't have much experience of that anymore, but it was kind of interesting.
Well, just remember, alcohol is more dangerous to your health, according to a brand new study. By the way, you ought to go up to the Associated Press and get that story before somebody yanks it. More dangerous than crack cocaine and heroin and you name it. The most dangerous drug is kind of the way I interpret it. That's quite a story, and I doubt that the powers that be will allow it to remain that long in the news. So I would grab it while you can. And speaking of while you can, let's take a break. We'll be right back. Well, all right, back to it we go. This is Ghost to Ghost Ham. It's a night when all we do is take ghost stories, your ghost stories, things that have happened to you. And with that, we go to Robert in Atlanta, Georgia, the air hub of the U.S. How you doing?
Pretty good, Art. How you doing?
Fine.
Huge fan ever since I heard you back in '96 interviewing the intergalactic vampire out of Jupiter.
Sounds like you're off on another planet right now. You need to get closer to the base of your phone there.
All right. How's this better?
Little better.
Okay. We'll try that there. All right. My 3-year-old, by the way, is a huge fan of the show. He refers to you as the Boo Man or the Boo Guy. He loves you. First time he ever heard your show was the Halloween one, the ghost stories. He loved it. Anyway, I'll just go into the story here. It started, this was years ago, when I had married my wife to the house we were living in. Her ex-husband, Ed, was living with some friends of theirs about two or three houses down from us. And every so often, we'd come down, and we could see strange candles lit up in their house and stuff drawn in their driveway in chalk. Come to find out that these folks have been dabbling in Thelemic occult instead of that, Anton LaVey devil stuff.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the really good, scary stuff. And every night that they had those candles lit, something strange happened in our house. We would have orbs tracking all over the place for hours, footsteps you could hear in the middle of the night all over the property, just unexplainable things. And then it all came to a head about maybe 3 or 4 months later when we were both at home. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and there was a loud, just a bang on the roof of our house. Like, what's going on? The winds had been kind of high, so I thought a tree branch had, crashed into the roof.
Yeah.
So I climbed up on the roof, no tree branch. Everything's fine. As I'm coming down, the bang happens again. What the heck is going on here? My wife heard it. She thought I was messing around. I thought she was messing around, making all that noise. And so I'm outside smoking a cigarette. I know, very bad. But I see across the street into the woods, there's some kind of large, shadowy, human-sized mass, but it's looking about a good 8 or 9 feet tall, and it's moving around back and forth. It's like, so black that all the night's drawn into it, so to speak. Uh-huh. And I'm like, all right, hon, you got to come out here and see this. I go to get her, come back, it's gone. This happens 2 or 3 times. Finally, she comes out there with me. We're both talking. We see it. It's not walking around in the woods this time. It's running. At this point, though, it's running across the street. And the shadow, as soon as it hit light, the shadowy form of it just kind of evaporated, but it almost, is invisible. But you can still hear the footsteps from it, slapping very hard. In fact, by the time it hit our driveway, I can feel the vibrations on our front porch. We both run into the house. As I'm slamming the door behind me, I'm just sitting here, calling out at Scripture, in the name of Jesus Christ, I bind the evil spirit and all this. And it stopped. And I'm like, okay. So I'm just walking around the entire, property doing that whole thing, trying to, claim it and all that stuff, trying to cast out spirits. And fortunately, that stuff never really ever happened again. But that was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen because you could hear grunting from it. And it
people call things to be. And apparently your neighbors called this thing, I don't want to say to life, to earth, I suppose. Neighbors. People who dabble in that kind of thing frequently live to regret it. You just never know what's going to walk through that door, do you? Northern Arkansas brings Maggie. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Art. How are you?
I'm just fine.
I wish you were on the radio more.
Thank you.
Anyway, my story is about my best friend. He was 47, and he died suddenly. He was also in an anoxic coma. That means he had been without oxygen for too long.
So brain dead or partially brain dead?
Well, they said no, but that he wasn't going to recover, and we took him off life support.
I see.
A few months after his death, I started dating a man who I thought was very nice, and I started being inundated with really weird dreams, and I could, when I was awake, I could hear my best friend who had died that December, right after Christmas, I could hear him say, "You better be careful, Mag. He's just like your ex." And
you heard him in what manner? You heard him from
in
your
my
sleep?
ear, just like I hear you in my ear. And it was so clear. It was like he was standing there talking to me. And I heard it several times. And I thought, and I had all these weird dreams, too, about things that the man I was dating was doing. And I thought, well, you know, how do you sit somebody down and say, well, my dead best friend told me? But I did. We were sitting at the dining table, and I was trying to explain this, you know, and ask him some questions. And I had this yellow lab, and they're very happy, jolly dogs that just don't bark a whole lot.
Sure.
And the man's looking at me like I've lost my mind or I'm just trying to bluff him or something, you know, and he's just kind of shaking his head. And my dog looks up at nothing and starts barking. And this dog never barks. And
was that enough for him?
Yes. It was great. I looked at the dog and I said, "It's okay, Sonny. It's just your Uncle Perry." And ultimately, everything that my deceased best friend had told me was true. And he just, I think he felt the need to protect me and to continue trying to run my life even after he had died. But it was all very, very strange.
At any rate, I guess that was the end of the boyfriend. Packed up and left. All right. Excellent story. Thank you very much. Dogs, you know, are like little children. They can see what others insist is not there. The whole concept of ghosts is something that you can, well, if you want to, laugh off. But it's really not a laughing matter, not if you've actually seen one. And this is a night full of people who have seen ghosts or interacted with them. And you should see the lines. I mean, they're all just simply packed. And I hope you'll join them if you've had an experience of some sort or another. I mean, a direct experience with a ghost. Then we want your story. But we do have a screener. Her name is Gina. She's a nice gal. And all you've got to do is convince her that that it's a good story, sort of a little version of what it is you intend to tell, and she'll get you right through and on the air, and we'll talk to you about it. You just can't listen to 4 hours of these ghost stories without beginning to conclude that, well, there is something going on. Not that people are around forever, but they do tend to stick around, particularly after violent deaths. There are a lot of those. So from Manila in the Philippines, this is Ghost to Ghost AM. Break the chain at your own risk. Good morning, everybody. I am Art Bell, filling in for George Norrie this Halloween Eve. Here it's All Saints Day, and my wife will be off running to a mass shortly. Daniel says the following happened to me, Art, about 15 years ago in northern Alberta. My friend Carl and I were walking home down a country road. To get to the pub we were at the college just out of town. As we walked, we kept hearing a noise from the bushes and the fields. It sounded like someone was following us as we went. Well, finally got to a farmhouse. As we passed, we could just barely see whatever it was in the moonlight, the fence post along the roadway. Something caught my eye. I turned and I looked, and there was a human form, actually standing on one of the posts. I grabbed Carl's arm, and we stopped and watched whatever this was for about 4 or 5 minutes. And all I can say is it looked like a half-dead, emaciated person. And whatever it was doing a strange, slow kind of shaman dance, all the while on top of this pole, and seemed to be staring right at us. We both got the idea together to run like hell. And we ran straight to the cottage and didn't look back. We were petrified. 3 months later, Carl told me one day he was diagnosed with cancer, only given a few months to live. I was devastated. My best friend was dying. Well, I spent a lot of time in his final months with him. Watching someone slowly die of such painful disease was horrible, to say the least. And on my last visit, it became completely clear to me Carl was the man on the pole that night. He was dying in bed, thin, pale, and I tell you, it was him. It was him we both saw that night on the pole dancing that strange shaman's dance. And again, that was from Daniel. In a moment, back to you. And now the business at hand. All the way from Montreal in Canada is Don. Hi, Don.
Hi, Art. It's actually Montreal, Missouri.
Montreal, oh, okay. Montreal, Missouri. Sorry.
It's okay. Not a problem. But I have a great story. It's a true story. It did happen.
Fire away.
Okay, back in, what was it, about 1980 to 81, right in there, my stepsister was divorced. Her ex-husband passed away. Well, I was pretty close to him because I used to go to the bar and pick up six-packs for him and all that because he was actually diagnosed with cancer, and it was literally eating him alive. So anyways, the day they passed, he was going to be cremated. Well, on that day, my sister was making toast in a toaster oven, like one of those ones that has like a glass window on it, you know what I mean?
Oh, yes.
Well, anyway, she's wondering what was taking so long. So as she started to walk over towards it, the glass blew out. I mean, literally shattered. It blew out. And what's crazy about it is when she got over there, she saw it was unplugged. And to top that off, the time that it shattered was the exact time that he was being cremated.
Well, that is weird. A coincidence?
Was up in Pennsylvania.
Maybe. In Pennsylvania, okay. Well, I don't know. A coincidence? Perhaps. Our brains do attempt to make sense out of the chaos. You know, we try and figure out what it is. And so some of it could be that. Some of it could be, the real thing. Seattle and Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Art. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Well, here's my story. A number of years ago, I got involved in a business venture back east. It was a family involved in the broadcast industry, actually, and I was brought into it by the daughter of the deceased patriarch of the family, who had been a very powerfully regarded individual in his community and had been extraordinarily successful in life, made a fortune. And also, there was a lot of contentiousness in this family, and she had told me that when her father passed away, he had said something to the effect of he hoped everybody would fight over the money that he left, which was to most of us, a huge fortune. Anyway,
he hoped they would. Wait a minute. He hoped they would fight over it.
Yes, he hoped they would fight over the money. Yes, that's what he had said. And in any case, I went back there to the home that her father had actually built by hand while he was developing this business.
Right.
And she told me that she had seen him there in the past 6 or 7 years since he had passed away. She had seen him there on numerous occasions, sitting on the front porch in a chair, wandering through the house. And it turned out that her father had a propensity to hide money, bearer bonds, all sorts of very valuable things. He would just stuff money in a wall, and so on one occasion, she took me down to the basement of the house where there was a safe that was about half the size of a full-size refrigerator. And she said, that safe's been locked ever since he passed away. We don't even know what's in there. But again, these people had so much money that if there had been $1 million in there, well, it would be nice to have another one. That was about it. And we weren't looking for money. We were looking for paperwork that would substantiate some things we needed to know about. So In this basement where the safe was, she said to me at that time, and I tried to open the safe and made sure the door was solidly locked, the handle was locked. I spun the tumblers to make sure that they weren't frozen and assured that the safe was locked solid. I basically said, well, okay, maybe a locksmith can open this thing up. And then she said to me, look at this right over here. And she took me about 10 feet away from the safe to a little cubby hole in the wall and a sort of open closet without a door. And she said, right here, up in the ceiling, I found $10,000 that he had hidden, stuffed up in the ceiling. So at that point, because I've had some experience with the paranormal, I just said out loud, say, listen, if you're still here, you're on the other side now. You should know that, this isn't what life's about. You shouldn't want this contentiousness and divisiveness to be going on here. You should want people to have a good life and, go on to wherever it is you're going to go on to.
All right.
And I walked out of the closet with her, and she went off into a separate area of the basement, another room, and I decided I'm going to take some pictures of this safe, and, maybe I'll call up a company and see what it would take to get it open, because it might have the paperwork we're looking for. Well, as I went to take the photographs, and I was looking at the digital viewfinder in the back of my camera, I noticed that there was something strange about the safe, and I put the camera down and went over to the safe a little closer, and I said, oh, my God, the door is open now.
Wow.
And the door was open. The door that had been solidly locked, couldn't move it, was open now.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the catch, Art. The door was open, but the great big thick steel bolts that stick out of the mechanism and go into the whole frame of the safe were still in the closed position. You couldn't close the door if you wanted to.
I understand. Wow.
So it was as if the steel bolts had moved right through the steel wall of the safe.
Oh, I understand. I can't stand it. What was in the safe?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you know what? After all was said and done, with this crazy group of folks, I took it as a message from her father, and the message was, hey, buddy, there's nothing here for you either. And he was right.
Oh, well, I guess he probably had a pretty good sense of humor. That's interesting and a little cruel. I hope you all fight over it. Then he left lots of bait to ensure that occurred. Yes, well. Alabama, all the way to Alabama. Annie, hi.
Hey there, Art. I know you're good with Morse code, and my mother died last February, and I went to her house, and I got her things, especially her little mirror she was so fond of when she was growing up, and I set the mirror in front of the microwave, and I began picking up Morse code over the microwave, so I whipped out my tape recorder real fast. I recorded all I could until my tapes were completely used up, and I still have those, and I wonder if I can send those to you. And I only heard one side of it. And
wait, hold on. The microwave was issuing microwave oven, right?
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh. There was Morse code coming out of the microwave?
Definitely dots and dashes. I've studied Morse code. I've been trying to pass my amateur license for years, and now they don't require the code anymore.
That's true.
However, I do have it on tape. And it was one side of the conversation. It would pause after several sentences and then give somebody time to answer, and I didn't pick up that side of it. I went on the Internet to see if there was any way that anybody else ever came up with a similar story, and I found one person who did. A lady said she was picking up Morse on her microwave, too.
Out of curiosity, obviously, if you taped this and you've now studied Morse a little bit, did you decode any of it and figure out what was being said?
I did, and it sounded like acronyms and abbreviations, and I couldn't figure it out, but I definitely made out letters and numbers. And there's some of the Morse that's ambiguous because you can run it together so fast you can't tell where they're stopping with one word and starting another one. and it was ambiguous because some of the numbers and letters had very similar sequences, and you didn't know where it was beginning and when it was ending. It was so fast. And I was also my tapes. Yeah, I'm going to send them to you. And in the same house, my mother and I grew up with my grandmother in this same house. And she died in the hospital. I went to a third house and got her mirror that she had in a fourth house in Virginia when she was growing up. She died in the hospital. So,
all right. Well, listen, I appreciate it. Morse code from a microwave. Interesting. Yes, I'd enjoy hearing the tapes, particularly if there's anything to be made out from it. Now, one might suggest that, as you know, when a microwave is done, it goes deet, 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 whatever, makes a little noise, right? Well, maybe that thing went crazy. Maybe it really wasn't Morse code, or maybe it was. I don't know. That's intriguing. I've never heard of a code-sending microwave. As I said, you could conclude that perhaps it went nuts and just was issuing random dots and dashes and sounds, or perhaps there's some sort of intelligence behind it, which is really freaky. Wildcard line, Pittsburgh. Joe, you're on the air.
Hey, Art, how are you?
Quite well, thank you.
I just wanted to say happy Halloween to you and all the listeners out there, first of all.
Thank you.
All right, I want to share my shadow person encounter that I had. This is about 2 or 3 years ago. What happened, I was sleeping, and suddenly I was having a nightmare. And I came out of that nightmare into a state of sleep paralysis. So I know a lot of your listeners know what that is. You know, my body couldn't move. The only thing I couldn't move was my eyes. I could look around the room. That was it. My physical body was still asleep. So when I looked to the left of me, I've heard of them before, but I was undecided if I believe them or not. I don't know. But there was a hooded figure, a shadow person, darker than the night that surrounded it, just absolutely pitch black. Like I never black as you can get. And I just went into an instant state of panic, you know. I mean, I don't know what this thing was. I knew it was a shadow person. I'm like, wow, they are real, but I was just so afraid of this thing. So the interesting thing, though, is how I got rid of it. What I did was I wanted to swing my fist through it a couple times, but of course I couldn't because my body was in a state of sleep paralysis. But whenever I thought of swinging my fist through it, I actually saw what I would describe as my astral arms, my astral fist going through the shadow person twice. I took 2 swings at it, and when I swung through it, it got like a static electricity, cold kind of feeling. And the moment I swung through it, I disappeared, and I came out of my sleep paralysis with a scream. So
lucky for you. Many others have remained in sleep paralysis while the shadow person / ghost disembowels them.
Yeah, it was quite a scary experience. I don't know. My theory on them is I think they're some type of interdimensional beings, and I think whenever we have fear in our lives, it's almost like a beacon to them. And
Well, I think that's right. I think that fear empowers them. It may even bring them, but certainly empowers them. So think about that next time you wake up and can't move. You're on the air from Denton, Texas, Catherine.
Oh, my goodness, it's so good to talk with you. We've missed you so much. My husband, I love to listen to you. My mother passed away in 95. She had been ill. She had several complications from cancer, and I stayed with her. I was the only family member that stayed with her the 2 weeks she was in the hospital, and she died that Monday at 8:05 p.m., and I stayed with her until the funeral home picked up the body. And I was the oldest child, and I was just, I was very close to my mother. And so after they picked her up and everything, I went to the motel to stay. And in the room I was in, it was extremely dark. And I was a mess, of course, and I had been crying. And I lay down on the bed. I hadn't even taken my clothes off. And I bet I'd been asleep about 45 minutes. And all of a sudden, I was aware of a bright light in the room. And I woke up and sat up, and I was looking at my mother and my Aunt Sue and Aunt Helen all standing beside each other in this white frame. It looked like a cloud, but it was a clear frame. And they were, and she's looking at me. She goes, "Oh, we've had the best time. We're playing canasta." And she says, "Now I'm playing something called 5-card draw. Do you know what that is?" And I'm just stunned. And I'm looking at her, and I'm noticing her hair. And I go, "Mom, what have you done to your hair?" Because she had hair down to her knees before her stroke, and it was all flipped up on one side. And I'm just kind of looking at her. I mean, I'm looking at them. I'm having a conversation. I'm looking at their eyes. It's like, this is amazing. I mean, I just saw her get wrapped up by a funeral home and taken away, and I've gone back and laid down and gone to sleep, and then they wake me up. Well, we went to the funeral home the next day to make the arrangements, and there were several of us there, and this little bitty, tiny Hispanic lady came into the crowd and kind of wove around a little bit, and she saw me, and she walked up and took me by the hand. And she couldn't speak English very well, so she kept asking me to go with her. And I said, okay. Well, she took me into the back of the funeral home and asked me if I liked how she had fixed my mother's hair. And I'm looking at my mother, and her hair is flipped up on one side.
Wow.
And and she's been with us. My mother and I are very close, and we've seen her in the house. And she was here about a week ago visiting, and she would come. We would have groups. I'm a psychic in Dallas, and she loved one of the people that visited us all the time, and we always knew when she was in the room. And my husband he was always asking me about the lady with the really bright blue eyes with the little floral house coat on. Well, he was describing Aunt Helen.
And none of this scares you?
Oh, no. I was so tickled. In fact, I could tell you, it got. I hate to say this. Mother knew I was psychic when I was 6. I started having dreams that came true after a very high fever. I had German measles, and
all right, we're way short on time, so we've got to scoot.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Oh no, I'm not afraid of her at all. She's with me, and I'll see her again, and I'll get to see the rest of the family. But what's fun is Carl sees them.
All right, I've got to hold it right there. I'm sorry, I just can't continue. We're out of time from the other side of the world. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. Ghost to Ghost AM, actually. Hi there. I am Art Bell, filling in for George Norrie this Halloween night. Here's an interesting one. Hi, Art. I've listened to your show for many years, enjoy it a lot. I have a creepy and true ghost story I'd like to share with you. My husband and I were married in the summer of '97. We traveled on our honeymoon. We stopped to rest at an old motel in California one night. Exhausted from hours of driving, we both went to sleep very quickly. I even forgot to turn off the bedside lamp. Shortly after dozing off, I felt someone gently stroking my cheek. At first, I, of course, assumed it was my new husband showing his affection, until I realized he was sleeping soundly on the opposite side of me. Confused, I turned my head and opened my eyes. There, leaning over me, was a strange figure wearing a dark brown cloak. Couldn't see his face, which was shadowed with a large hood. Needless to say, I was very frightened, sat up, and began to scream. At some point, the figure seemed to rise up into the air and dissipate into a mist. Startled by my outburst, my husband woke up, and he searched the room for any intruder. No one found. The door to our room was locked tight. The two of us, therefore, concluded it must have been a nightmare, or perhaps some sort of something brought on by the stress of the wedding events. And for many years after, I thought little of it. 13 years later, this past summer, my 8-year-old son came running into the house just as the sun was setting. He excitedly reported that he'd seen a ghost while playing outside near my bedroom window. Going along with what I believed to be merely a child's imagination, I smiled and said, "Really? What did he look like?" "Well," he replied, "it was all brown, and it had a hood." I never told my son about the night at the motel, and given the unusual appearance of the ghost, I find his description to be an extraordinary coincidence. What do you suppose it means? I don't have the slightest idea. All right, back in a moment with your stories. Well, all right, the ghost in the machine just wiped out some of my information on the screen, so I'm just going to have to wing it. I think it's east of the Rockies. Good morning. You're on the air. Hello? West of the Rockies.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Okay. The lady said I had to do this very, very fast because it's kind of long. When I was about 7 or 8, I heard somebody singing Christmas carols. It was Christmas Eve. He was singing Christmas carols rather badly. So I got up, looked out the window, and down on the street, I looked down, and the road was dirt. And I knew it was to be paved, or it was paved. And this rock wall was missing. I go, oh, that's weird. And then here comes this guy stumbling down the street in a Santa suit.
In a what?
In a Santa suit.
Okay.
And he stumbles up the hill, like walking through where the rock wall was, and he stumbled along, and there's this old well that's still there to this day, and he falls down the well. And me, 7 or 8 years old, I go, oh, Santa fell down the well, Santa fell down the well. So I run outside, down the stairs. I was in an old 2-story house that was old even when Vallejo was new. And I looked down, and there's the well was filled with dirt, just like it was the day before. And I look out, and the road's all paved, and rock walls there, And I go, well, maybe I just dreamt it or something. And I go, so I go back upstairs and go to bed. Then, at about 4 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Day, I wake up, and here's this thing floating over my bed. And here's the guy in the Santa suit floating over my bed. And he goes, your presents are here. And 7 or 8 year old kid goes, oh, presents. And I go, great. And I go over, grab my brother, I said, wake him up. I said, Santa said our presents are here. Santa said the presents are here. So we run downstairs, and there's all the presents there. And I go, the presents are here, the presents are here. And we wake up our parents, screaming and hollering about the presents. And my dad comes out, and he says, what are you kids doing? It's 4 o'clock in the morning. And I goes, Santa said our presents were here. Santa said our presents were here. And he looks down at the floor, and there's 3 extra presents that he doesn't know where they came from.
Really?
Yes.
And what, pray tell, were in them?
My dad tells me to open the one marked for me, and it's an old wooden, like, handmade train.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's quite a story, and obviously a present he had not given you. Well, a present from the other side. I guess those things can happen. All right, so I think east of the Rockies, we're correct this time. You're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, hi.
Hello?
Yeah, hello again.
Yeah. This is the first caller line.
Okay. Yeah, I had everything wiped out here, so.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm Delbert, and I'm a truck driver going through Amarillo, Texas. And about 25 years ago, my wife at the time, her sister had gotten killed in a car accident, ran a stop sign around in front of a truck, and her 3-year-old son was with her. Well, he wasn't 3 yet. It was just before he turned 3. He pushed him on the floorboard and fell on top of him. Well, she was killed, and he was just fine. Well, we buried her the day before his 3rd birthday.
Uh-huh.
That day, on his birthday, me and my wife at the time, we were in getting him ready in his bed. Well, they were in her mom's house, and in the room that her sister that got killed and her grew up in. And her father had taken the mechanism out of the door because they kept locking the door. So the door just automatically swung open all the time.
Right.
And this is a hot July day in Nebraska. It's 90 degrees outside, and we're in the room with the 3-year-old getting him ready for his birthday. And all of a sudden, that door swung closed and locked, and there's no lock on it. The room got so cold that you could see your breath.
Really?
And all of a sudden, the 3-year-old looks up and says, "Hi, Mommy."
Really?
And he sat there, and like his mom was sitting there talking to him, he said, "Okay, Mommy. Bye, Mommy." And then the room just warmed back up. The door just swung back open like nothing ever happened.
And you saw all this happen?
Yeah, me and my wife at the time were in the room with him when all this happened. And the funny part about it is, he is now, last I heard, he was in medical school becoming a doctor.
Does he remember all of that?
I don't think he remembers any of it. I haven't talked to him since her and I got divorced.
Well, I'm not surprised, particularly about the conditions you described. There is, for some reason, severe temperature drops are associated with spirits, and I firmly believe that. Witness the story I told you all yesterday. I firmly believe that. Okay, let's see. Where are we going? I think this might be the international line. You're on the air. Hello. East of the Rockies. Okay.
Hello?
East of the Rockies. Hello.
Can you hear me, Art?
I hear you, yes.
Hi, Art. One thing I'd like to say before I start is the spirits are alive in Texas this Halloween.
I'm sure they are.
Well, I've heard so many stories coming into your lines tonight that have been from Texas. It just kind of makes my heart a little proud. But I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I live with my grandparents in an old house. It's always been theirs, and there's no, like, Indian burial grounds or anything going on, you know. And I had come down one day, one night, actually, after I got home from work. I'd stayed up late on my computer. And I came downstairs to go and get a roast beef sandwich out of the refrigerator. And as I was passing through the living room that I'm pacing through now, we're telling the story to you in, I went over to our sliding glass window and opened the curtain and looked out at our big magnolia tree out into the night. And after about maybe half a minute looking outside, I saw a form materialize in front of me. It was almost like it just quit blending in with the night. And it was maybe 6 feet tall, and it was the figure of a man wearing a trench coat and a fedora hat, like a gangster-type hat, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And didn't have any discernible eyes, you know what I mean? There didn't seem to be any features to him.
Right.
And I saw him looking at me, you know, I was looking at him. And more than I saw him looking at me, I felt him looking at me, and he sort of pierced my psyche or something, like he was digging through my brain, trying to size up if I was a threat or something like that. You know?
I'd be trying to size up how much of a threat he was.
Right, and this was a very quick type thing. This was, I glanced at him, and he glanced at me, and in that one glance knew me, if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
And he took one, maybe, he looked tall, man. He looked maybe 6'5", maybe 7. He's a tall guy. And he took one step towards the sliding glass window that I was behind, like one striding big person step. And as he got closer, I kind of noticed that the edges of them were hazy, almost like something out of a Predator movie or something, just hazy, you know? And as he took the step towards the sliding glass window, I recall distinctly what I said. I said, Jesus H. Christ jumped up and played the fiddle. And upon me reciting that little phrase that just popped up out of nowhere, he kind of stepped backwards and started blending in again, like he'd always been there, and just went back to where he was.
Boy, isn't that strange? You know, sometimes I think that the spirits, or if you will, the ghosts, are as surprised on occasion seeing us as we are seeing them. And I wonder if that means that some kind of door suddenly washes open for just a moment, allowing them to see this side and allowing this side to see back to that side. And again, the reason I say that is because so many stories seem to include the spirit, in whatever form it takes, being nearly as surprised as the person. Let's go to a wild card line. You're on the air. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Art?
Yes?
Hi, first-time caller. I wanted to talk about a ghost story that my mom and older brother recited to me.
Okay.
They had gone to the St. James Cemetery on Calsag, and they were walking around just looking for relatives on my dad's side of the family.
Mm-hmm.
They found them, said some prayers, and they headed back to the car. To their horror, they had discovered the gates had shut. It was the middle of the day, no clouds in sight, no reason for them to close. They started to freak out, shook the gates, then the church bells started ringing. At the same time, they looked back to the church, saw what was described to me as translucent figures in robes coming from the church. This caused them to freak out more, shook the gates again, and then they called my dad to get over to the cemetery. When they looked back, the robed figures were gone. Dad got there. He went to the gates, and he pushed them open gently. They weren't stuck together anymore. It was pretty freaky for them.
Well, I should say so. There's something about being shut in that's bad enough. But to be shut in, then begin to see ghostly apparitions, that would cause outright panic. Absolute outright panic. In this person, anyway. Yet another wildcard line. You're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning, Art. It's good to talk to you finally.
Thank you.
I've got a pretty crazy story. Back about 12 years ago now, I guess. About 17. I was in a band at the time, so we did a lot of recording in my buddy's basement. Mm-hmm. And so we're passed out down there. It's just he and I. And he's sleeping on the couch. I'm sleeping foot to head down on the ground next to the couch. And he'd always told me about his house having cold spots and it being on burial grounds and all this stuff. And we do live in southeastern Wisconsin, so there are a lot of burial mounds around here. Anyhow.
Right.
So this is all prior to, mind you, this night. And we're at about this time of year, too, about 12 years ago. And he had passed out, and I just was staying up watching TV. Turned the TV off, and just starting to drift off to sleep. And I had this eerie feeling I did feel a cold spot come over me, and I'm just like, okay. And I look over. For some reason, I just glanced over under the light switch by the door. For something was getting my attention. And I look up, and I see a little girl, and I can make out this much of her. I can make out she's got a hood up, and it looks like a raincoat, and she's hunched over, like I'd say about a 10-year-old blonde girl. I can see the blonde hair coming down over her face because she's hunched. Right. And she's grasping a flashlight. And I thought this was really odd. I did a double take, still there. And she kind of looked up a little bit. At this point, I just punched him as hard as I could, and his name was Augustine. So I was like, Augustine. And he goes, what is it? And I go, there's somebody in the corner over there. I couldn't even make out words. I'm freaking out. And he knew exactly what to do. He goes, come on, let's go. So we run upstairs, and I had to run past this spot where I saw the little girl. We ran past it, ran upstairs. It's like he knew exactly what to do. He had been to temple many times in Chicago and had been to Bangkok, and he's a Buddhist, Thai Buddhist. And he gave me a blessed gold Buddha to hold in my hand for the rest of the night, and he had some other piece that he had got blessed, and we held them, and I felt completely at peace. Now, granted, I didn't go into any more detail with him. He didn't even ask questions. He was like, do you feel better? I was like, yes, I feel a lot better. Thank you. And I just was kind of like, am I freaking out? Is it me? Whatever. Week goes by, and just going about our, normal whatever. And one of my closest, he was very close friends with a friend of ours. We both had a mutual friend, Erica. And she was the same age, dropped him off about 11 o'clock at night. And she calls me sobbing when she gets home, and I said, what's wrong? What's going on? And I hadn't told a soul about this. I didn't even describe this to Augustine. And she said, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? You're going to think I'm crazy. And I'm like, what is it? And she says, she's just sobbing. I just dropped Augustine off, and I did he lived at a cul-de-sac, okay? Mm-hmm. So she was doing it after she dropped him off. You have to do a U-turn, to get out of there. So she's doing it as she's turning around in the cul-de-sac. She sees a little girl running in slow motion with blonde hair, with a yellow raincoat on, grasping a flashlight in her right hand, running clear as day in slow motion. She turned her brights on because it was shining right at her. Turned her brights on, and it got even more illuminated. And she just turned around and hit it, and that was that. So I knew I wasn't crazy, and I reassured her that, look, I saw the same thing, same little girl in his basement, and we just both just kind of lost it emotionally. And I still get emotional talking about it to this day because it's very, I don't know, just a freak thing.
I appreciate the story. Thank you very much. Sorry to cut you off there, but we are, relatively close to Bangkok here. And I must tell you, it's interesting to me that people encounter these spirits, and then they turn, of course, to their faith, and Bangkok is completely Buddhist. I don't know if anything's completely anything, but predominantly Buddhist, I guess I ought to say. And it seems to banish the spirits and comfort the living as much as a Christian turning to Christ or uttering something from the Bible. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what that should suggest to us, but I do find it interesting. We don't have a lot of time, but Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Hey, Art, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Where are you?
I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time, so what's up?
All right, well, this was about 10 years ago when I was around 8 years old. Right after my mom and dad had got a divorce, my mom and me and my brother had moved into this old house. And from the moment we moved in, this house, I knew that this house was creepy. We had strange things would happen, since we moved in. Like you would hear noises and you'd feel the cold chills, and but little odd things like that would happen. But nothing concrete until one night, me and my mom were home alone, and I was in the bathtub, and I was just kind of relaxing in the bathtub. It was just a normal night.
All right, hold it right there. I'm going to have to hold you over the break, okay?
All
so
right.
We'll get back to you in the bathtub. This is Ghost to Ghost AM. Ghost to Ghost AM, actually. Good morning or afternoon or evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Ghost stories and nothing but this night, and we've got somebody waiting in a bathtub in Chattanooga. We'll get to him right after the break. Back to the bathtub in Chattanooga. Hi.
Hey, Art. So anyways, like I was saying, I was in the bathtub, one night. It was just a regular night. And it was just me and my mom at home. Well, anyways, I was just relaxing in the bathtub, and I happened to look up, and in the doorway was standing this entity. Now, the only way I know how to describe it is what you or George Norrie have talked about on the show as being a shadow person. And so here I am, just a little kid, sitting in the bathtub, and there's this thing in between, it's got me boxed into the bathroom, and I'm terrified.
And
it
you're
seems
also
like
naked in the bathtub.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting here in the bathtub.
So what happened?
Well, anyways, it seems like it stayed there. It seemed like it lasted a couple of minutes. Well, then it just vanished, and so after it vanished, and the shock kind of wore off. See, usually I'm a very, what you would call a modest person, but I got up and ran from the bathtub naked into the living room where my mom was sitting there, and I told her, Mom, I saw a ghost, and of course, she tried to tell me, you're just imagining things, and that whole spiel. Well, where the story gets interesting is after we'd moved out of the house, my mom, told me, Dusty, I told you were just imagining things, but I actually talked to the people who lived here before us, and they pretty much said they got the hell out of there because they had a lot of bad experiences with ghosts in the house, and that was my story.
All right, well, a good one it is, too, and that's exactly what I think any of us would do, clothed or not, as a child. You see something like that, and as soon as it's clear, you run for mommy, clothes or no clothes. That makes it completely believable. Of course, these days, if you have an entity in the house, when you sell that house, when you dispose of the house, however you manage to get rid of it, you have to notify that person. Legally, you have to notify them that you live in a haunted house. And the one you're selling them is haunted. Kate in San Gabriel, California, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy All Hallows Eve.
Thank you.
I have an older brother who's a firefighter, and he's been a firefighter for a number of years. And I had a younger brother who suffered a very tragic death. And it just so happened that on this one particular morning, my firefighter brother was at work, and his coworker had to go in and check on a minor injury he had. And he asked my brother to go with him because, there wasn't really much going on at the station. So my brother said, yeah, I'll go. So they arrive at the hospital, and my brother's there in the waiting area, and this ambulance pulls up, and they bring out a gurney, and following it is several local police officers and lieutenants, and just a hubbub of activity. And normally, my brother is around this activity as part of his job on a regular basis, but for some reason, when his coworker came out and was ready to leave, my brother said, I want to see what's going on. I'm kind of curious. And that's usually unlike him. And so, while he's waiting there, a female coroner comes out, and he asks, hey, what happened? And she said, well, we have this male, John Doe, and she gave him a little information. And he had a thought, but, of course, you kind of dismiss certain things. And the next day I had to call him and tell him that our younger brother had passed away, and it just happened to have been who was being taken into the hospital that morning. Hello?
Okay. Yeah, right here.
Oh, yeah. So, I don't know if it was just a twist of fate, coincidence, or just, the bonds of siblings. Later on when we were going through my younger brother's personal belongings, we found a journal, and he had written that out of many of our family members that this one particular brother was someone he admired quite a bit.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate the story. I don't know that it qualifies actually as a ghost story, but certainly a sad story. California brings Sue. Hi, Sue.
Hi, how are you? Nice to speak
Very
to
well.
you, Art. Mine, I don't know if it's really a ghost story or not, but anyway, it's different. About 3 years ago, in the month of June, we had a death in the family several days before this story occurred. I was in the house, and it was about 1:30 in the afternoon, and all of a sudden, all this angelic music went throughout the house, just permeated throughout. I could not say where it started, where it ended. It was the same sound throughout. I went upstairs, downstairs, and the house was built in 93, so it's not an old house.
Right.
And I wasn't scared at all. I thought, this is beautiful music. I wish I had a CD, or I didn't know if I was being called to heaven or whatever. And then around 9 o'clock that same night, again, I'm by myself. There was no radio on, no TV, nothing. And my son phoned me, and all of a sudden this music started again, the same identical music. And I just put the phone out, and I said, do you hear anything? And he goes, yes, I hear music. So I know it wasn't in my imagination.
Gotcha.
And I don't know of anybody who's experienced anything like this. I'd love to know if they have. And it was a beautiful experience. I asked neighbors if they had heard anything. And like I said, it was a warm June day, and nobody had heard anything. So,
well, I have no idea what that would have been, but that's an interest. It's very interesting that the music was real. In other words, it was heard over the phone. So, anybody else have an experience like that? That's the first time I've heard of anything of that sort of an overall everywhere around you type music. Daniel in California, you're on the air. Good morning.
Yes, how you doing, Art?
Fine.
Okay, let's see. In 1986, we lived at the time right outside of Cabot, Arkansas, in between Lone Oak. And my mom, she worked at an old nursing home, and she worked at night. So at night, she would get in the car, she would go down this old gravel road, and coming up to a four-way intersection, on the upper right-hand corner, there's a church, and the upper left-hand corner, there's a cemetery. Anyway, she's going down the road one night, and she sees this girl right just outside of her beam of the headlights of the car who runs across the intersection. Anyway, my mom gets scared, and she's worried that somebody's chasing the girl. My mom floors the car and gets out of there. Anyway, she gets home the next morning. She tells everybody about the whole story. A few months later, the whole experience dies down, and my dad goes off hunting or fishing at night, and my mom needs a babysitter for me. And so we're going down the same road, and I'm just tall enough where I was sitting in the front seat of the car, so I'm just tall enough where I can see it out of the passenger side window, but I can't really see over the dash.
Right.
And it's about 11:30, somewhere around there, because my mom had to be at work at midnight. She kind of like gasped a little bit. She says, "Oh my God, there's that girl." Anyway, and I can kind of see the detail of the dress and her hair, and she's walking on our side of the road, and she's looking like down towards the ground, towards the ditch. And right when we get up to where the girl's about even with the door frame of the car, my mom screams, and then she floors the car again, and right as soon as we pass, I kind of try to look at the girl, and she has, like, no expression on her face, like, no nothing, like, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just all blank. Anyway, in the early 90s, a show called Sightings was aired on Fox, and just so happened they were doing a reenactment in Lone Oak, Arkansas. And the reenactment was based off in the 60s. There was a guy going down the same area, and he sees a girl around the age of 16 walking on the side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up giving the girl a ride to her house in Lone Oak. And he gets her to the house where the girl says that she lived at, and he gets out of the car. He walks around to the back of the car, to the passenger side, to open the door to let her out. Well, as soon as he opens the door, there's no girl in there. So he ends up walking up to the house and knocking on doors. A lady answers the door, and he says, "I just brought a girl here." And the way he describes the girl, the lady says, "Well, that's my daughter, but she died a couple of years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago." And they did that reenactment on Sightings. And we were all watching it one night. And
yeah, it's not a big surprise. A lot of television and radio have reported on that sort of thing. And it seems as though spirits do the same thing, and this is frightening. I admit it's frightening. They do the same thing over and over and over again. It seems more like a hellish thing than it does something you would expect on the other side. Perhaps it's true that the spirit has really gone on and is in heaven or wherever you go on the other side, and maybe it's just some sort of weird echo that's happening again and again and again, because you certainly wouldn't want to think that once you pass to the other side, you are destined to repeat the same walk over the same road eternally. No, you wouldn't want to think about that. Okay, let's go to, that was a weird noise in here. Let's go to Chad in a truck somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Hey, Art, how are you doing tonight?
Just fine.
Hey, first off, I want to say it's good to hear you again. Because of you, I got into paranormal investigation. But I got a quick little story for you. My grandma, she passed away in 91. About 3 years after she died, there had been a few family friends, that said that they'd go out to the grave, and before they could get up to it, there was a teenage boy sitting on her headstone. But he'd just take off running down over the hill. My grandma, where she's buried at, right beside her, she's the last one on that row. It goes down a hill, and there's a little bit of woods there. Well, after about 3 or 4 people saying something about it, I decided, well, I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to try to catch whoever's sitting there and, give them a piece of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I go out there, and I seen him. He was sitting there. He had his foot cocked up on, propped up on the headstone, and he was sitting there drinking a Coke. I started walking over. Huh?
I said, here we go again. It's, I just mentioned that it seems as though these spirits are caught in some kind of loop, doing the same thing again and again and again, and that's what this sounds like.
Yep. Well, I got probably about 20 feet from it, and it hopped off and ran down that hill. Well, when it hopped off, I took off running after it, and I got to the top of the hill just as he was getting ready to go into the trees. He stopped, looked back at me, and smiled, and then just dissipated.
Yeah.
So I went back to my grandpa's house, and I said something to him about it, and he just kind of smiled, and he goes, hang on a second. And he went upstairs and came back down with a picture, and he showed it to me, and it was my uncle, her big brother that died in '88.
Wow.
But he was a teenager, and my grandpa said that the day that they buried my grandma, he walked over to my uncle's grave, because he's 2 rows over, and he said, well, Gomer, she's back in your hands. I need you to watch after her for me. My grandpa said that was your uncle just sitting there doing what I asked him to do, to watch over your grandma and take care of her.
Which could have been said casually, but then was accepted as an eternal job. See, that's a little scary when you think about rolling over to the other side one of these days, that you would be in this eternal loop doing the same thing again and again. But then again, maybe it's not the real human spirit doing that. Maybe it's just sort of an echo of what was. It's easier to think about that way. Elizabeth in Ardmore, Oklahoma, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you this evening?
Fine, thank you.
Well, I just have a story. My friend committed suicide about 2.5 years ago, and in the beginning, I was very worried about her, and so I was constantly thinking about her. And I had a ringtone on my phone, on my cell phone, that I just decided that I was never going to change this ringtone. Mm-hmm. And let me back up. I apologize. I had the cell phone, the ringtone reminded me of her. And then I had all these technical difficulties with my phone. So one night I was laying in bed and I had lost all, like, my pictures, my ringtones, everything on this cell phone. And it was laying in my bathroom. And I hear the ringtone that reminded me of her go off. But I had lost that ringtone. It was gone. So at first I thought, maybe it's some kind of glitch with the phone. I don't know. But it was in my bathroom that night. The next morning, I go to bed, and the next morning I wake up, and from just listening to your show, and from what I understand, I think I was in like a sleep paralysis, because I woke up and I heard the toilet flush in that same bathroom, and nobody else was in my apartment. But I couldn't move, and I couldn't tell if I was asleep still or dreaming. And I wanted to move, but I couldn't move. So I kind of rolled over when I could finally, several seconds had passed, kind of rolled over. And when I rolled over, I saw like a black, like no clothes figure, like it was like they were sneaking out of my bedroom from that bathroom. So I don't know. I don't know if it was maybe, my friend saying, don't worry about me. I don't know. It was just...
Right. Well, I guess a lot of things are never to be known. Our brains try and associate them with things that makes sense. And so we make that association. So it could be that, or it could be simple coincidence that you saw this. Who knows? All right. Wildcard line, you are on the air. Good morning. Not a lot of time before the break. Fort Myers, Florida. Hello.
Oh, hello. Hi. I couldn't hear. My name's Elaine. Are you? I have a
Yes,
story.
go ahead, Elaine.
Okay. Yeah, I have a story, but it's probably not going to be enough time before the break. Start out. My sister was back in 1971, and I was 21. She was 17, and the first part of it is I was on vacation. I went away on vacation, and I had just bought my first car and left it at home and everything. And the last day of my vacation, I was going to come home to Hollywood, Florida, where we lived, and I had this horrible dream that somebody was in my car, and that I was driving it, and somebody was in my car, and they were going to die, and that there was it was rolling down a highway, and I had no control of it, and that whoever it was going to die in my car, and I had no control of it.
All right, you're right. We're out of time. So what happened? Did somebody, in fact, die in your car?
No, there's another half of the story.
All right. The other half of the story coming up. Stay right where you are, and we'll pick you up after the break, all right?
You.
Okay, good. Stay right there. From Manila in the Philippines, flip side of the world from the majority of you, this is Ghost to Ghost AM. Those are the ghostly numbers. All you need to do is pick one, the appropriate one, and call it and tell us your story. At any rate, we're going to take our break, get it out of the way, and come right back and get the rest of the story. That was interesting, wasn't it, when the government announced the recession ended? Must have been the ghost in government. All right, back now to our halfway point. The rest of the story, as Paul would have said.
Hi. Thank you for letting me tell the rest of it.
Sure.
This was like the premonition part. Like I said, I had this dream and everything, and so when I got home, then when I got home, because my sister had borrowed. What I found out was my sister had borrowed my car and went to a concert down in Miami, Florida, and we were living in Hollywood, and went to a concert down there with her best friend, and somebody killed my sister and her best friend in my car.
Oh my God.
When they drove 30 miles from Hollywood, Florida, all the way down to Miami, and drove all the way back, and there was a cop that was off duty, and he was drunk, and he ran a red light and killed him 1 block from my house. And I knew something was wrong when I just knew something was wrong when I had this weird dream. And sure enough, when I got home, they said, well, we didn't want to call you because you were going to come home the next day, but you don't have a sister anymore, and you don't have a car anymore. And then the biggest part of the story is, her and I shared a bedroom together. We had twin beds, and this was back, like I said, in 1971, when people just had stereos and 33 records and all this and everything. And we used to play, we shared the stereo, but we didn't play the same kind of music. We were really close and everything, but she liked one kind of music, I liked another, and we didn't like the same records or anything. Mm-hmm. But evidently that night while I was away on vacation and she was going to go on this concert, she was sitting there like any typical 17-year-old girl at her vanity, putting on her makeup and playing the stereo and playing her records and everything, and got ready for the concert and left. And then evidently there was this 33 album that was sitting on the record player, and after I got home and the accident and the funeral and everything, a week